So, hi everyone, and happy Star Wars Day. And welcome to the Camunda User Group Meetup for South Florida. So, I'm very, very excited about today's agenda. And we will have a customer showcase by one of the Camunda customers, NewPush, and NewPush customer, Laureate. And we'll also have a live Camunda demo by Ryan Klaus. And please, please feel free to ask questions throughout the chat, post a question in chat throughout the agenda, and we'll be sure to ask those questions and answer those questions during the meetup. And then at the end of each presenter's talk, we'll open up the floor for you to ask questions live. There'll also be a general Q&A session at the end, so if you want to stick around and ask any other questions at the end, or even do some networking with each other after, that's cool too. The link will be live and open. And again, like I said, this meeting is recorded, so we'll be posting it to the Camunda blog as well as our meetup page. So before we jump into the talks, I want to cover what our meetup mission is and what it's all about. So our mission is to really bring together like-minded peeps that talk about workflow automation and business process management and establish more regular meetups. Right now we meet quarterly, but I would like for us to meet up more frequently if there's participation and a need. So this forum is to discuss all of the industry latest developments around BPM and including Camunda's product contributions and promoting a user community of learning. So before we jump into the talks, I want to poll the audience for some questions. These questions are 3 questions, and I just posted a poll URL for you to go and launch. And each question should take about 10 seconds to respond to. So for those of you who do not have the URL because you just joined, I can repost it. So the first question that you should see is, where are you joining us from? Do you all see that question? On the map, please drop your location of where you're joining us from. And I'm going to share my screen so you could see all of these locations pop up.
Now we'll get to see who knows geography.
I definitely did it wrong. I don't know geography very well.
I mean, I don't see any markers in the middle of the ocean, so I think we're pretty good so far.
Awesome. All right, so it looks like mostly US and Canada. Cool. So let me open up the next question. Do you all see what company you work for? Okay, so lots of ultimate peeps and lots of Camunda peeps. We have some peeps from Atlassian and Laureate. Cool. So then here's the last question.
So Bob, what am I using?
Enterprise.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for participating in the poll. So let's jump into our first talk. So I would like to present to you all Dino and Bob. Dino is from Laureate and Bob is from NewPush. And just to give a little brief intro, NewPush, they provide a host of services ranging from web hosting to cybersecurity, identity management, data protection to customers across North America and Europe. And NewPush is a Camunda customer, and they run all of their solutions on top of the Camunda stack. So Bob, who will be presenting from NewPush, is their VP of Product Development. And then Dino, who's from Laureate, he's their Director of IAM. And just a little bit about Laureate Education. They're a leading provider of quality higher education through its global network of degree-granting higher education institutions and state-of-the-art collaborative partnerships with industry leaders. Laureate is a customer of NewPush and also a customer of Ultimate Software. So Laureate has been a customer of Ultimate Software since 2007 and has over 5,000 employees. So take it away, Dino and Bob.
All right, I just wanted to make sure that you guys are able to see the screen. Are you guys seeing it in presentation mode or in a slide mode?
It's good. It's in presentation mode, Bob.
Perfect. Okay, great.
I would do just one correction off the bat, Michelle. I'm really bad that way. Laureate is more than 50,000.
Yeah.
Oh, so sorry.
I was going to correct that. It's 50 to 60,000.
Okay.
Global employees.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
So, I just want to say a few words. I'm Balázs Nagy. I'm the co-founder of NewPush, and so here we're first of all, we're very happy that you invited us, and Josh, thank you for brokering that, as well as the Camunda team. We have been using Camunda for a few years now, and we have we started our process to go to Camunda Enterprise last year, and this year we have rolled out our first Camunda Enterprise-based production system, and we're very lucky that Dino, you had time to explain to us the business problem, and you'll give us some of the context and some of the past of how we got to what we needed to achieve for you as the IM director of Laureate Universities. And then Bob will dive, and we will lift the hood for those of you who are more technical, and we will dive into kind of nuts and bolts. But of course, we're not as deep into Camunda Enterprise as Ryan. So at that point, it will be a transition to Ryan, who will show us and go even further into Camunda Enterprise. So we'll show you in a real life environment what we started using Camunda Enterprise for, and then you can dive deeper on the second one. And Michelle, you did a good job introducing the speakers. So with that, I'm just going to let you take it away, Bob.
Thank you so much. So I think we structured it so that Dino first take us through the business challenges that Laureate had been facing and the areas where we work on together, and then I'll take it over and go into semi-technical aspect of what we've done in terms of automating some of the processes that was presenting some challenges in our project in Laureate. So Ryan, if I said that would be your cue of jumping in, because that probably means I have no clue of the question. So
I will do my best.
So without further ado, Dino, take it away.
Sure. So, first, thank you for this opportunity. As introduced, my name is Dino Minuti. I'm the Senior Director of Identity and Access Management for Laureate. And really what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few minutes here, and I'm going to come at this from the business perspective, just talk about challenges we had, one of the reasons and why we engaged NewPush to help us address these challenges. So a little bit about Laureate, we're a multi-billion-dollar company. We're international, and we did not have an IAM solution. We had basically a heterogeneous environment, multiple apps, multiple processes. We had no standard IAM platform. A lot of out of band, a lot of manual processes, and really what that did is we had a lot of how would you say, risks around both compliance, more around compliance, because we are a publicly traded company. We had SOX issues we had to address. So one of the things we needed to do was have a global, authoritative view as who has access to what. So that was the core fundamental IAM business problem we needed to address. And also because of our nature of being diverse across the globe, we regularly have acquire institutions. We've also sell institutions. So we also needed to have a platform that was robust and flexible to support our business model. And like I said, the real reason we were trying to do here is because we are public traded. We had we needed to adhere to SOX compliance and regulatory compliance. So we needed to get a standard IAM platform. And with that, as we all know, comes all the workflow, all the processes, all the requests, the deprovision and provision that comes along with that. So we embarked upon, how do we go about getting this solution? So next slide. So when you look at this from a business problem, one of the key things, and I'm going to just talk about what we had to do, is that when you're going to roll out, and I'm going to speak about IAM, but I would think this would be can be agnostic to any ERP type system. Because of the nature of our audience, you needed to have, the key thing we needed to have is an IAM program structure. You needed to have a large governance model so that you could have a structure put in place, and that's not only the business side but also the technical side, so that you can understand, have all the input into everybody you need. What that means is we need strong stakeholder engagement. So just to let you know, our business model is region based, and so one of our regions is Brazil, another one is Mexico, another one is Chile, another one is US. So we focus ourselves by regions. So our stakeholders were the CIOs in the regions, and as well as the senior business partners in the region. So we had both technology and business. And once you create the structure and you get the engagement, it's really important that we focused on what is our scope, what we're trying to do. And there's many things you can tackle. So one of the key things, as I said, is we did not have a homogeneous environment. We had a little bit of all of the above. So we wanted to focus on a standardization. And what I mean by standardization, not only we bring in a platform, but also standardization from workflow. How do we request things? How do you provision things? How do you mainly provision and deprovision, but that workflow, how do you have approvals? And so whether it's single, secondary, or tertiary approvals, again, all workflow. Deprovisioning and provisioning from a workflow, whether they're in band or out of band, and as well as audit reporting. And then once you have a scope on that, one of the things we had to do was prioritize. And we did this from a region perspective, but also we wanted to follow, and something I'm very much supportive of in any of the multi-enterprise programs I've been involved with in my career, is I like to use a crawl, walk, run methodology. So we tried to identify, we focused on our corporate infrastructure first, and then once we got a good handle for that, we started rolling it out into the regions. And always looking at it is, how do we find repeatable factory standard workflows, processes that you can now spread across the region? How do you decompose your business problem into, say, it's more of a widget? How do you make it agnostic? Not so we do not want to make everything, country specific. Where are the common processes? And this is one of the challenges when we reached out to NewPush. These are the business problems and what I was approaching. These are the things we had to solve. So how do we go about getting there? For identity and access, the core of everything is the identity. Now, as Michelle said earlier, our authoritative source is UltiPro. Multipro is our HR source of record. So that is where the starting gate is, as a new person hired, as a new person's terminated, there's our workflow. How do we get who is the person and what status are they in, and how do we start taking action upon that? We also have a separate authoritative source of non-employees, I call them, or contractors. So bringing those two together, we now are able to start getting the holistic view of who has access to what. And then when we lead on top of that, now that we have our audience, we start looking at what is, from a privilege perspective, from a risk perspective, SOX, because again, we're regulatory compliant, so we wanted to find out what applications are SOX relevant, your financial applications, and then put different levels of workflow and risk mitigations around those. Again, and that's a lot about when you're going to grant somebody. If it's a low level, read-only access, maybe you just auto provision it. But if it's higher, then we would go through an approval workflow. In being able to, as with any system, have the audit and maintain to be able to compare these over time, so that if there's ever a look back, you have all the data. And so this was the core of where we're driving, because it's all about the identity of who we then. And when I say identity here, we're also talking about individuals, but we also have things like service accounts and generic accounts, things of that nature. But basically all about an identity, whether it's owned by a machine or it's owned by an individual. Okay. So where do we go from here? So one of the things in my role as I looked at is I would encourage anybody in this space is really, I see two pieces of this puzzle. There's the preventative aspect of IAM, basically, on giving a user what they have access to, approving it, reviewing it, and that's your preventative control. And so that you try to do the best right up front with your preventative control. But the second part of the control is, this is where we use is trace identity, and through is your detective control. So through either quarterly reviews or semi-annual, whatever process you need to have in place, you want to go back and do a look back and verify, usually so some part of positive assertion, who has access to what? Does the manager approve this user? And both of these programs are in my world because they really go hand in hand. Because when you have the preventative, hopefully you'll have less of the detective. And the reverse is when you're doing the detective and we find things that are out of band, you can start looking at, how did this access get granted? Is there a process we're not aware of? Are people still doing things I'll call it the old-fashioned way? And so again, you'll see many workflows in here, and how it all is about workflow, because in an audit and compliance world, you got to make sure you have the completeness and accuracy as you go forward. So armed with this, one of the things we did, this is a high-level model that we used in place. And what we're really trying to show right here is that even though we're an international company, even though we have many different applications, we brought this down to a very reusable, what I'll call factory model. On the right-hand side, you have Laureate and our system integrator working with them. And then in the middle, we worked with NewPush, and their core of here is their factory model, and being able to take all the source data, bring it together, and add your business rule, add your workflow, add all your checks and balances. And in the end, what do we do with all that? We see two things here. You have your identity and access management platform. This is where I was calling your preventative control. And then we have something called the user access reviews. These are our quarterly or whatever periodic interview you want to do from a compliance perspective. And there's your detective controls. And this is how we rolled this out internationally, that we followed the same model so that we were able to get economies of scale, and it solved the business problem. Because one of the things that we don't want to have is every country doing it their own way. So from a business, I pushed heavily, and also working with my partners to be, how do we architect, how do we design something that is really a standard across the board? And that is how you're able to be successful internationally when you start achieving a lot of these standards. So with this, and this goes back to one of the very first bullet points I talked up front, is the importance of a governance model. Now, we happen to be large and international across many regions, but if you were just across many departments, I could see this working the same. You were able to have clear roles and responsibilities about who are the stakeholders, who are your local teams, who is it, you have to have the appropriate testing. And because we had multiple regions, the local leads and the local implementation is very critical, because we also have very, very high Spanish speaking population and Portuguese and English. So we had to be able to make sure all our languages are supported. And that also came into the play later on for communication from workflows. We wanted to make sure our platforms were also localized from a language perspective. So the governance, while we had it, is so key about what you need to do to keep all the glue together as we continue to work through all the challenges as roll this out and working with a technical partner to make it happen. But this is being able to address all the business problems. So this is a high level. This is a high level to show you what our business problem was. To re-summarize, we didn't have any repeatable workflows and repeatable processes. We had kind of all of the above, and every country and every region did it. And bringing in this type of structure, we were able to, of course, over a year and a half, put together an international program that now I'm happy to say that what you've seen here has been rolled out throughout the enterprise, and it's being used in every region at our company. And we continue to grow and add to it. But we were able to bring a bunch of disjointed or siloed applications or siloed processes in countries into together with common workflows, common processes. With the tech, I'm looking at it from a business, and I'll do one later on. Bob can speak to under the covers the technology that was used to achieve this business goal. So at this time, my job was to give you guys an introduction of our business problem. And is there any questions, or I don't know if anybody has any other same problems that I may be able to answer, entertain any questions.
Victor is giving thumbs up.
Yeah, I see some thumbs up. So maybe Bob, you wanna?
Okay.
What did you say? I'm sorry, missed that.
We got some thumbs up, Dino.
No
Thank
question.
you so much.
Okay, so I will turn it over to Bob.
Thank you very much. So Dino talked about holistically as to what the challenge was, and my job was to take the business challenge and understand where we can facilitate the answer to those business challenges using technology, and how we would be able to automate these technologies so that we can efficiently and effectively deliver those services to our clients. So when we start looking at the automations in respect to Dino's program, we had a few observations. First and foremost, the scale of our project was quite large. Laureate had many applications. We only had a view of just about 100 of them, but I'm sure they're in hundreds. And each of these applications varied in size. Some had maybe hundreds of users. Some had tens of thousands of users. And what was common between them is that they all had a mix of accesses. Some had privileged access, and all of them had a user access that was required for us to somehow rationalize and automate. And in the process of doing so, we gathered just about 4 or 3 major processes that we needed to consider when we were doing the automation. One was that we needed to have a systematic way of gathering application information, which contains the accounts, and also bring in our source of truth for identity, which, as both Balazs and Dino mentioned, came from Altipro. That process of bringing these two together is referred to as reconciliation, and I will talk to it a bit later. But basically what that process needed to accomplish was to be able to find an identity for each of the accounts that we bring in from the applications. Now, the information needed to end up in our identity analytic tool that was used for achieving what Dino called as UAR, or user access reviews. And that required a bit of a journey from where the data was obtained to the data that it landed into our analytic tool. And the process actually was quite complex because some applications brought the data to us via systematic way. Sometimes we had to go fetch those. Sometimes we had to go to some common platform like SharePoint to obtain those. And in many aspects, we also had to transform that data into something that can be ingested into our identity analytic. And data transformation is something that we needed to be very, very careful of, because in the world of audit, the custodian of the data is responsible for maintaining the integrity of the data throughout the process, from the data acquisition all the way up to data consumption. And we had to pay a great importance to make sure that that process is honored. Further, we also have to make sure that our ingestion process is also optimized, because with hundreds of applications and hundreds of thousands of accounts, it took significant amount of time for the data to be ingested or be put into our identity analytic platform. And when we looked at the whole thing holistically, it was extremely becoming complex and error prone. And we thought that that's one area that we had to pay a lot of attention to, and we had to start an automation of it very, very early on in the process. And also the other areas of the importance was the approval. And approval came in many forms. Approval come from approving of the roles. If you guys are familiar with the concept of job function and job family, in Altipro, we have these concepts implemented. And what we've done is we gathered those and we mapped those roles into similar concept as the job function and job family. And we had to obtain approval to make sure that mapping is accurate and is reflective of the security model of the applications. So that requires significant effort to ensure that that approval maintain the integrity, and we also keep track of who approved one and when, so that if any point auditor asks for it, we can present the evidence for them. Also, applications need to be approved by the governance committee, as Dino mentioned, in order for them to be onboarded. We couldn't just bring in applications as they become ready, because they also had to go through quite a bit of process to ensure that the applications are all done in proper order, and then we all have all of the business owners lined up so that when the applications are onboarded, they appropriately can take on the user access reviews. So that's also another area where we need to obtain approval. We need to maintain and track those approvals for evidence purposes. Also, applications needed to commit in sending the data in one or many ways that we have, and that approval need to be obtained, and the method by which the data gets to us, as well as the schedule, also need to be maintained in a very accurate manner, because we looked at the configurations for all those and making sure that we understand where the data come from and how to pick it up and what period and what the frequency do we need to pick them up. So with that, what to automate was the next question. We knew that we had to automate it. We knew that we had this challenge, and if we were to do this manually, we are definitely not going to be able to meet the expectations of our client. And in gathering all of these process, we started to look at putting priorities on some of these steps, because obviously we couldn't automate them all at once. And we had to take, step measure in making sure that when we automate them in an orderly manner. And we had to work with the rest of the team to coordinate that automation. For instance, we couldn't automate the receiving of the application data until we coordinate that with the application owners and onboarding primes to make sure that they're also committed to the same process as we are trying to automate. Now, the next question came as to how to automate this. The task was daunting if we didn't break it down into a smaller deliverable, particularly around the breadth and the distribution mechanism and how the data was presented from all angle of the enterprise, from regions, from countries, and then also some countries had a consolidated means of gathering the data and presenting the data, and some countries didn't. There a lot of the applications, they had to use an identity source, and that identity source came from Altipro. So we had a very good accuracy model with them, but there were some that they basically defined these identities internal to the application, that through the reconciliation process, we need to identify those identities to make sure that we understand what accounts to belong to what identity, whether it's a system, as Dino mentioned, or an individual. So we had to drive the automations of bringing on accounts into this identity analytic framework, and also auditing those accounts as it relates to provisioning, because it's also as important to deprovision accounts when an individual role changes or they leave a corporation as it is to grant them, and perhaps more so from the audit's perspective. So that was one of the areas that we had to really ensure that when we automated in a very orderly manner. The other thing was that, as I mentioned, the data was coming from many different sources. Some of them manually delivered that data. Some of them had an automation, and quite advanced automation, such as Altipro. We were able to very early on automate the data coming from Altipro as one of the first applications. We brought it in on a daily basis. We received feed from them on a daily basis. And some of them we had to go and fetch the data. And we did that through the existing investment within Laureate. So we can do this in a way that we can also track how and where we brought those data. And that's one of the areas that we thought it was a good area for us to automate and ensure that the process are all followed. The other thing was that, as Dino presented in one of the slides, there was a lot of system-to-system communications. The applications communicated to one another through APIs, and those APIs were rather complex because they were not just one-dimensional. They often had multi, attributes that we need to gather from different areas to present to them. So that was one of the areas that we had to carefully design our automation around. The other thing was the timing of the correlation. So that, as I mentioned, the data from Altipro came in on a daily basis, but some of the applications, the data didn't come as frequent as the Altipro, and we had to make sure that we aligned the data with the identity. To give you an example, what happens if you don't? Let's assume that you are using a newer account data and an older Altipro for some reason. The account cannot be reconciled. We don't know who that account belongs to because we didn't receive the source of identity for them. So that is one of the mandates during the audit for you to ensure that when you are looking at the account, you're looking at them same period. You're not looking at distinct phases. So that took a lot of effort to ensure that the data that coming in was also marked and timed and dated in a way that we can use that dating topology to compare with the data that we receive from Altipro. Also, as the application grew, we learned that if one of the application failed in the process of ingestion, caused some challenges around other applications that they were in the same package for ingestion. So we had to ensure that we had the process to deal with that kind of a failure, so that failure of one application doesn't cause a failure of the others. So that means that if the application failed for some reason, application didn't come, or application had a data quality issue, we had to pull that application out of the ingestion in order to make sure that the applications can go through. Or if the data wasn't that far off, we could use the last dated application. For instance, we may have received the applications within the same period of the time that we were trying to do the access review for. Also, as a part of our process, we need to ensure we meticulously log every step out of the way. Here is when we went to pick it up. Here is where the file was before we pick it up. Here is what the file is after we pick it up. Here's the checksum before. Here's the checksum after. We didn't touch the file. Here's what we had to do after the file was dropped in this location. Here's the transformation that happens to the file. Here is where the file movements look like. All of these need to be logged in a chronological manner, because that's one of the areas that auditors will look at. There is a concept called chain of custody, that the custodian of the data is responsible for maintaining that chain of custody throughout. And of course, we also have to service a request that comes in from our client. Can you tell me who did this approval for this application in this week? And we had to go through the logs, and that's one of the reasons we found that we needed to upgrade into enterprise, because we needed to have a very quick and accurate manner of accessing those logs in a very, very specific manner. And also, we had a very large data query. If you can imagine, the things get into this big data platform in our identity data technology. And there were multiple dimension accounts had, personal information, it had application information, had identity information, had membership information, and all of those need to be joined and need to be returned back to the users through their user presentation. So that was one of the areas that we started to look, and we decided that very early on, we used Camunda as our technology. We first started, as Balazs mentioned, in the community version, but we soon after we decided that we need to really take advantage of some of the capabilities that comes with the enterprise version. So I'm going to pause here and ask if there is any questions, if there's anything I can help answer before we go into the BPMN version of that. For those of you guys that would like to see it under the hood, I can certainly show you the our ingestion process. So as I said, there's many different automation paths that we've taken, but I have included in our slide deck snapshot of our ingestion process, from application data acquisition all the way up to the data ingested into our analytic platform. Any questions, any thoughts?
Hi, this is Victor. I do have one question that I wanted to ask. Except for two items that you mentioned, what other examples of enterprise features that you are using?
Really, customer success is a very valued area where we usually couldn't benefit from. So Josh had been extremely helpful getting us the help that we needed. He checks on us every once in a while to ensure that there is no issue for us implementing it. Throughout learning, basically during the CamundaCon we attended, the one last year in Berlin, we actually was able to sit with subject matter experts and ask a lot of questions that help us in making decisions to move to the enterprise. So for us was the accuracy, ability for us to have a official support. If anything goes wrong, we can pick up the phone and help, receive help. And also some of the features like the logging and browsing and through the logs, and ability to be able to fine tune and query the data in a way that they can be reported back on, was one of the reasons we decided to go with enterprise. Did that answer your question, Victor?
Yeah, no, that's great. Also, there is some questions in the chat if you want to read them.
Oh, okay, let me take a look at those.
Yeah, I was trying to answer them offline as you were talking, but if you want to add anything, I think Camunda is actually a really fast system, and we have seen it in much larger deployments than the ones we're using. We don't have one big monolith of Camunda. We use it on a per customer basis, so that may be, and that may be different the way Ultimate Software uses it. So I heard that there are some tech people from Ultimate Software on the call, so maybe you guys can actually share your experience of how your SaaS product is. Our SaaS product is very compartmentalized because of the sensitivity of the data. We actually set up separate pods for each customer, and their data is not commingled. So we don't have one massive database that goes too big in that sense. I don't know if somebody from Ultimate wants to take that one.
Hey, Willard. Dan here. I'm the tech lead for workflow team at Ultimate. I was actually the one who asked the question. I was actually more curious from
That's not encouraging.
So, I mean, my comment is going to be right now we're nowhere near your scale yet. So what we currently are doing is more of a kind of a single database that with multi-tenancy in it. But obviously we're looking at what the scaling options are. And, I've been reading around obviously about the various ways that you can partition data, but this was more of a generic question to see kind of what your thoughts and experiences were.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to pull back the kind of the curtain a little bit, we use two open source databases under the hood. One is Postgres for the SQL part, and the other one is MongoDB for the NoSQL part. And on Postgres, we can easily do 10 million transactions an hour. So we're going nowhere near the transaction limit right now. So we haven't hit the transaction limit. And then on the other side, on MongoDB, we can scale. We could scale easier to 5 terabytes, and right now we're sub 1 terabyte. So again, we're not close to the scaling. What we did encounter in performance, and Dino was smiling if the camera was on, but we have some really large batches to load because these massive batches come from hundreds of applications on the Laureate side, and in the terms of the heterogeneity, they're one of the largest examples. We have also monolithic examples in large aircraft manufacturer where they have a very standardized IT and don't have different applications in different countries. That are very different, and there, we can scale up to thousands of applications that we ingest overnight. At Laureate, we were, for these ingestions, single ingestions, we were struggling even with hundreds of applications in batch mode, overnight ingestion. So this is where we're actually working, but that's not related to Camunda. That's related to actually bring and massage the data into the standard data model for the identity analytics, and then to apply the business rules specific to the customer. So that's what actually takes time. Camunda is not a bottleneck. And I don't know, Bob, you want to add anything?
No, absolutely. That's very precise. The process, I don't know whether it's legible for people or not. This is the ingestion process alone. As you can see, there is a lot of moving parts. The data we have to validate, we bring in the data, then we have to verify the users. Then we have to verify with some of the applications, they have Active Directory backed identity. We had to verify all of those. The efficiency is not on our ability to ingest. It's all of the processes that need to happen before the ingestion needs to happen is taking a lot of business rules. The ingestion itself is a lengthy process, but the preparation of us to get to that stage, it was a massive undertaking because of the normalization and the standardization of the data that we received. So this process here, I think we're running out of time, but this process basically is just preparation of where the data needs to come from. How do we need to get the data, and where the data sources are. The next phase is to get all the reference files. The reference files are the mapping. I mentioned job function, job, job family. All those mappings need to be related to the roles. So we have to make sure that those roles are accurately, categorized. And then up to this point, they're all business processes. They all need to somehow correlate together before we can do the ingestion. This part here is where the ingestion starts to happen. And as I said, we've got over 14, 15 APIs that are used by different systems. And every one of them need to be cached because we got tremendous amount of data that can be queried at once. So it can come back and says, give all of the applications, give all the users for application that happens to have this type of activity done in the past 3 months in this region, for instance. So you can see that there's a multi-dimensional query requires a lot of horsepower in making sure that we can return the values in an appropriate manner.
Cool.
I think,
question. I was going to say, I see that what Carlos was saying, that these business processes are quite large with a lot of steps and tasks. How long do these take on average to go through, I guess? Is there a lot of like waiting from outside kind of interaction to proceed, or are all these service tasks just kind of execute quickly and go through the whole process?
Well, it takes time for the ingestion process and caching, but the rest of them are fairly straightforward, fairly quick. Every time you see a little, clock, that means that we had to make sure that we don't, paralyze that effort, because we needed to have, we had a dependency on a previous step. So to answer your question, the efficiency was through rationalizing and normalizing all of the business processes ahead of time. The ingestion process was because of the sheer number of the data and application that took that long.
And one last thing, most of these processes, I guess, are started, like you mentioned, from a batch kind of scenario, not as a result of an individual interaction to the system to actually start the process. Because I guess there's
yes, we have both. Yeah, they're all systematically scheduled for periodic ingestion, but our system administrators also have an ability to execute all of the steps on demand. They can come back and say the client wants to have an ingestion for tomorrow for these applications, and they can select those applications and execute these for only those applications.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, Ryan, I think I've taken 5 minutes of your time, so I'll turn it over to Michelle so we can.
Bob, actually, there is some questions that are for you.
Oh, okay.
I'm fine. This is an interesting conversation. So,
how the workflow is built, which I cannot answer because they're detailed. I don't get level.
So before we start designing this in BPMN, we started from gathering the business requirements. That came from Laureate. Then we sat down and mapped those business requirements to individual technical KPIs that we need to deliver. We have done all of those ahead of time before we can even get into the modeler. Everything was, as you see here, was done in a modeler, and we export and import and directly push the modeler into our environment. So every step of this here probably have a Confluence page that we have gathered all of the requirements for, define the dependency, define input and output before we start getting into the design in the BPMN. Did that answer the question?
Actually, I think there was a more specific question about why do we use error events instead of a compensation event or something like that. So
let me see.
And Carlos, if you want to specify better the question.
Compensation. Can you give me an example of the compensation event, Carlos?
Yeah, so actually, it was just curiosity because I scanned through the BPMN and two things came to mind. One, there was a point on your slide that said you needed to audit every single step, and so it looks like your BPMN actually outlines every single step. So you don't really put more than one function into a BPMN task, or at least that's what it appears to be. So that's sort of how you achieve auditing. But also, I noticed on your the first image slide that you have of your BPMN, you have like several error events that then call what would be referred to as a compensating event, which is that cleanup folder.
Yes. Yeah. So let's say during the process something happens, Carlos, and we had to abort for that application. We had to, by law, preserve all of the processes that was used in getting that data into the identity analytic. So all the compensating factors need to be applied to that error. And when you see the message admin, that message admin also have a box that you don't see here that goes to all of those cleanups that need to happen afterwards. Make sure that the data is revert back to its original state. Make sure the data is archived. Make sure that the logs of the email to the administrators are all archived along with the data operations that performed on that also archived with that data. So everything that we have done was to ensure that we have an ability for auditability across all of them. In your point about doing it synchronized in a synchronized manner, that's one of the ways for us to be able to create a repeatable process, because the ingestion process currently cannot be done in parallel, because you really need to do them individually to be able to do the correlations effectively. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, to a certain degree. I was actually, it's really not important. It was more just because I saw all those error events. And the interesting thing about compensation events in general is that you can, they act like exception handling in code bases, where you throw the compensating event and then you can catch it in some other place. And so but I understand the need to kind of have the details about where that compensation occurs from, so that you compensate appropriately. And so you answered it, but
yes,
I'm almost thinking that just requires me to do a little more research to see if that's actually that can be accomplished with the compensating event. But
I'm more than happy to, Carlos, follow up the conversation. Maybe what I will do is that I will connect you with one of our lead business architects, and she is the one actually is really in tune as to how to leverage the technical capabilities of our workflow process. And I'm more than happy to follow up to make sure that if there is any lesson to be learned by us, we take advantage of it.
Yeah, of course. And by the way, hi, I'm Carlos.
Hey, Carlos.
I'm the architect for the workflow team at Ultimate Software, and I used to be the architect for the IAM team. So all of this is literally my playground.
Ah, there we go. That's why you're asking. I understand. Thank you.
You have shorter hair on the picture somehow.
Quarantine vibe.
Yeah, that was pre-quarantine.
So yeah. Okay. No, I mean, I appreciate Carlos and all of you, because I think that's how we get better, by exchanging ideas and challenging each other. So
yeah.
So I really appreciate those questions, and I hope we don't get defensive about it. That the goal is really to help us to help each other make better. So thank you very much. And I saw, Ryan, you were making some signs, so maybe you want to chime in, and maybe that's a good segue for your demo. I don't know.
Absolutely. So, well, I was just thinking about compensation events in general. First of all, this is an extremely complex BPMN model, as you know. And I was thinking about some of the intrinsic behavior of what a compensating event does, and how, if I were in your position, I may have made the same design decision to rather be more explicit, I guess, out of an abundance of caution to really adhere to governance, or in this case, to adhere to the law dictating that you must maintain every step of these attempts, even if you do correct them at some point in the future. I think it would be interesting for you to look at compensating events. When I teach that as part of a training, it's always a little tricky, because there's some what appears to be magic that happens. It's kind of like a rewind. In fact, the symbol looks like a rewind.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Right. It's one of the more difficult concepts to get across to a group of beginners. It can surely be used in more complex cases. I understand both the question, and I understand why it was not used in this case, if it was intentionally not used. I think it would be good for you guys to discuss that, to see if that gives you.
I welcome that opportunity, Carlos. I certainly would take you up on your offer of teaching us how to do it.
I can't say that I can teach anybody, but I just have lots and lots of questions. So sometimes the best conversation you can have is the one that just gives you the question and forces you to find the answer. So I have lots of questions. Don't worry about it. And if you want to have conversations any time of day.
Thank you so much.
So we tried to time ourselves. I promise you we did dry runs and we wanted to not run over, but somehow in the heat of the action, we ran a little bit over. So our demo is probably not as powerful as Ryan's. I don't know, Ryan, if you want to us to launch into a demo or you want to launch straight into, because now we're encroaching on your time. So really up to you.
I'm happy to take over and present at this point.
And I want to just quickly introduce Ryan as well, and just thank Bob and Dino for your presentation, and Balazs, thank you so much for you guys prepared and it shows. So thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And just to introduce Ryan to the team, Ryan is a technical consultant with Camunda, and before joining the Camunda team, he was a full stack Java developer. His passion for helping companies digitize, in particular by workflow automation, brought Ryan from his developer life to Camunda, where he now specializes in pre-sales engineering, training, and post-sales optimization for Camunda enterprise customers. So welcome, Ryan, and take it away.
All right, thank you very much. So let me first begin by attempting to share and present. Hopefully that goes well. So I will present. Oh boy, let's see here. My entire screen, I suppose. Let's go with screen 2. Can't share your screen. You might not have permission to use screen recording on your computer. So let me make sure I can grant that. That's probably on me. Let me grant that permission. Oh, and I have bad news. In order for me to be able to share, I'm going to have to bounce them out of the meeting and come back. So I will be right back. Now might be a good time to run to the restroom if you need to. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Let's see if I'm able to share now. Okay.
Coming up.
Yep, we see it.
All right, excellent.
Well, we see your desktop.
Yes, this is a mountainous effort I've undertaken to show you. Let me bring up my slideshow here, and I will present. Okay. Okay, so hopefully using Google Slides on a Google platform will go well. I did prepare some redundancy around that and can fall back on PowerPoint if I absolutely must. But here we go. So I've already, well, the first thing I want to say is that was a fantastic presentation. And I'm a little nervous to have to follow that presentation, but that's okay. I'll do the best I can. Again, my name is Ryan Faust. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate both the opportunity for myself to participate in this group and present, but I also appreciate you spending some of your evening with me, and I do hope that you'll view this as time well spent. There is a good chance that many of you here this evening attended the last or a previous Camunda user group meetup where my colleague Chris Allen presented one of our Camunda showcase demos. That demo is generally what we use in the pre-sales phase to help make the case for why a Camunda prospect would want to become an enterprise Camunda customer. It's a great demo that shows off all of our products, but those calls are usually very time constrained. So not all of our enterprise features are covered. So I'm glad I have this opportunity to take a closer look at some of those features. If you didn't catch that demo, I'm still confident that you will enjoy this presentation since you're all at least somewhat familiar with the community version of our software. So let's get going here. This is my personal agenda. I'll cover some, probably not all of the product features and a few other non-product related aspects of Camunda's enterprise offering. Let me make this clear. This is definitely not a sales pitch. My goal here is to make this fun and interactive, while also, of course, teaching you a few things that you may not yet know about Camunda's enterprise features. To this crowd, I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but we shall see. Then I will give you a demo of a new feature in Optimize, which is our business intelligence and reporting tool that is only available to our enterprise customers. To demonstrate that new feature, I'm going to be stealing part of a presentation by our co-founder Bernd Rucker from our live CamundaCon event a couple of weeks back. So Michelle asked that I make sure to show this here in case you were not able to attend. So then finally, we will have a Q&A session at the end, and I'll answer any questions that I can about product features. Also, like I said, I want to make this fun, so we're going to nerd it up just a little bit. Hopefully everybody can see my little nerdy animation here. Happy May 4th. May the 4th be with you. All right, so let's jump right in. I do have some overview slides, but I will always try to follow these up with some more exciting, live demo stuff. So here's a very high-level overview of the difference between the community or free version of Camunda and the enterprise version. You can see the difference in products and product features, but also please notice the section at the bottom labeled support and maintenance. Okay, let me see if I have a. Oh yeah, look at my fun tools. Okay, so right down here, support and maintenance. So we have a fantastic support team. Someone already touched on our people, but I'll do it again. We have a fantastic support team that is available 24/7 to help address any product or implementation issues you might be experiencing. This team is located in Berlin, but regardless of the hour, someone is always available to help. The way you would interface with them would simply be to enter a support ticket in our Jira. Also regarding product support, notice that enterprise customers get all of our patch releases as well as major releases for all of our software. Then at the very bottom down there, if your issue is not something that can be addressed in a reasonable amount of time or requires, say, more in-depth analysis of your specific implementation, right, like within your tech stack, then that ticket, that support ticket would be referred to the consulting team. This means someone like Chris or myself would take over that ticket and really dig in. So we do have a large consulting team based in Germany and other places throughout Europe, but also a North American consulting team that is distributed across all of the North American time zones, which was by design. So hopefully there's always someone available close by to help you out. Just so happens I'm the guy in the Southeast. So again, thank you for inviting me. So what is a consultant at Camunda? Well, you're looking at one now. We specialize in pre-sale support. I already had that lovely introduction from Michelle. Also, training and post-sales optimization. We are made up of technology professionals from various different backgrounds. We're all able to dig into your specific process use case, but also your specific tech stack integration, which is going to be different from company to company, right? So we do sell packages of remote consulting hours with each enterprise license. Those typically come in bundles of 10 hours. That may not sound like a lot at first, but I can tell you that the consulting team has a lot of latitude on how we charge those individual hours. We certainly don't start a stopwatch, for example. So if it takes me the better part of a day to learn your stack or research your question in depth, it's not like I'm going to charge you for that time that I have to ramp up before I'm able to actually help you. So that's something to keep in mind. We also handle the training of your business and IT stakeholders in the BPMN 2.0 standard. Also, specifically your developers for more technical training, such as training for Java developers, DMN training, DevOps training, and more. So as a matter of fact, today I gave day one of our BPMN 2.0 training to a group, and I'll be doing that all week. It's been kind of a long day for me, so bear with me. Here's just a quick overview of our training offerings. I will make sure, in fact, I'll do this right now. I'm going to drop this link in the chat. So you can get a complete view of the training offerings that we have. And okay, I promise not to make this a sales pitch, but I did have to plug our people and our awesome consulting team, which I'm a member of. So onward to the enterprise features. Okay, so let me introduce you to the process automation lifecycle as we see it at Camunda. I'm going to try to cruise through this stuff quickly so that I can catch up and save time for the fun demo at the end. Basically, we have the design phase, the automate phase, the management phase, and the improve phase. We prescribe this approach very similar to an agile software development approach, right? So continuous improvement. With that in mind, and we'll come back to this as just as a prompt every so often, but let's start with the design phase. So collaborative design with Coemo. Camunda promotes the idea of collaborative design, but collaborate with who? At Camunda, we believe in fostering business and IT alignment from the very beginning of the design phase. This is a key concept or a key feature in our concept of developer-friendly BPM. So a great tool to use during that phase would be Coemo. The name comes from the purpose of the tool, Camunda Web Modeler. It's free to use, so feel free to log in. What I'm going to do now, because I promised I'm not going to show you just flat slides here, is I'm going to demo the actual difference between the community version and the enterprise version and show you some specific and pretty cool features. Okay, so if you're not familiar with Coemo itself, it looks a whole lot like Modeler. You're able to model your BPMN process diagrams simultaneously with multiple people, yada, yada, yada. The only thing you can't really do here is add that developer metadata to make this process automatable, but we'll come back to that in a moment. For now, I'm going to show you Coemo. All right. Okay, so what I've done is create myself a personal account just to demonstrate that this is a free tool. Oh no. Well, that's just like a live demo for you. I promise I verified that before I started, but we'll do it again, not a problem. Okay. Let's try that one more time. Yes, definitely keep me informed. Okay, so this is the community or free version of Coemo. I'm moving very quickly here, trying to be cognizant of time. So what I've done is just set up a little sample diagram, right? And super basic BPM in here, but I want to show you milestones. And milestones is the name we give our versioning mechanism within Coemo. So you can see here that here's my first draft of this particular very fancy process. And then up next is the next version, right? So I'm able to track these versions over time. So it's pretty important in the design phase to keep track of where you started and where you ended up. Of course, when you're collaborating with someone else, you'll see who created the milestone. It may not be you, it could be someone you're collaborating with, which is pretty cool. But now let me show you how that looks in the enterprise version. Okay, so I will spare you the login this time. I am logged in as myself here, my Camunda self, and we're going to take a look at the same feature but in the enterprise version. So I have a slightly more fancy but still super simplistic BPMN diagram here, right? And I want to do the same thing as I did before in the community version. I want to show you the milestone history. And you should already be noticing some differences, some fancy colors here that we have added. So let me start. Oh boy. Okay, so I'll just create a new one for you since this is not entirely clear. So the point here is that I'm able to compare the latest version with the last version graphically, right? So, or visually, I should say, which I'm not able to do in the free version. So if I were to go back to the current version, and let's say we are going to add some additional workflow step here. So some new workflow step, and I will create a milestone there so that I can keep track, because I feel like this is an important change. So now let me go back to the milestone history. And what we can see is here is the first version that I showed you, right? And here is the milestone that I just created. So you get a nice visual representation of additions, which are shown in green, or edits, which are shown in yellow. Also deletions, which would be shown in red, right? So this is specifically an enterprise feature for Coemo. But wait, there's more. So we have a few more that are pretty cool, and I would like to show you those now. Let me go back to my slide deck for just a moment.
So Ryan, there's a couple of questions on the chat.
Sure, happy to take them.
So Becky asks if there's any training available for business analysts leveraging the modeler and Coemo for process modeling.
Absolutely. In fact, I said a moment ago that I am currently delivering our BPMN 2.0 training class to a group of people from another company, and in that training, our goal is to teach the BPMN 2.0 standard in a way that is agnostic really to any BPMN compliant software that you might use, right? Obviously, we would like you to choose Camunda, but we really try to get across the foundational understanding of BPMN, and that class is not only appropriate, but I would say, required for both your business stakeholders and your technical stakeholders. I try to foster a little competition in there, because I usually get a few wise guy developers who have had some experience, and so they try to jump ahead in the exercises and specify task types and use symbols that we haven't covered yet. And it's fun to watch the business analysts stay up at a higher level and actually complete the exercises more quickly and more accurately. So yeah, that is a class that we offer, and I would love to teach it to you.
Awesome. Thank you. And then Dan asked the question if the BPMNs are exportable along with the different milestone versions in the community version of Coemo.
Okay, I'll take the first part of the question first. Or let me divide that into two answers. So yes, of course, we are able to export the BPMN diagram as BPMN XML, 2.0 XML, which is directly then importable into your modeler. We are also able to, so what happens in the modeler? We take this newly created and agreed upon diagram, agreed upon between the business and the IT stakeholders, and we say, okay, developers, go and automate this. So we export from here, they import into modeler, they enhance this model with all the technical stuff to facilitate, connections to your existing software or new software, right? But what about the round trip back to Coemo? And that actually is a perfect segue for the next two enterprise-only features I'm going to show you. So without the enterprise features, you could certainly take that automated modeler enhanced version of the diagram and import it back into Coemo, right? You will not see the technical information in Coemo by design, but you also won't lose it. So you can continue to do that process, export from this tool, import into the modeler tool, export from the modeler tool, import into the Coemo tool, and you can do all of that with the community version. As an enterprise customer, we make things a little more fancy, as you might imagine. So let me bring this back up for just a minute. And hopefully I can go backwards on my slide.
Ryan, you said you won't lose data, assuming that you haven't deleted that particular task to which the data is tied. Essentially, like if you get rid of that element that has the extra data, and then you bring it back in Coemo as just a basic element, I'm assuming at that point you do lose it probably.
Well, it depends on if you created a milestone in Coemo before you did that export, right? So you could set that governance up certainly to make sure that you don't lose that information. It's a good point. So with these additional features, we make that just a little bit easier. These features are if we look down here under Camunda Stack, I apologize for this little guy, Camunda Stack integrations, we have the Camunda Engine integration and the Camunda Modeler integration, right? So let me show you how that works. Let's see if I can demonstrate that. The idea here is to automate that round trip and not lose that information that you're talking about without having to have the forethought of, oh, I need to create a milestone. Okay, so let's see. So let's say I have let's say I have exported that model from Coemo and I've imported it into Modeler. I have, and I've enhanced it with, in this case, you know, technical metadata, right? I'm saying, hey, this is a service task. The implementation will be external. We will use the external task pattern here to create a topic and have some external worker that can subscribe to that topic, pick it up and do the work. And I have implementations for all of these, which will be important for a later part of the demo. But the idea here is I now have this plugin, Cloud Connect. And again, this is available only to enterprise customers. So let's see what happens if now I have exported a version of this diagram, but I make a change in my development phase, right? And I might do this under two scenarios, which we'll talk about. So here is a new task. Here's a new task. Keep this simple. So fingers crossed, since this is a live demo, what I've done now is, looky here, it worked. So just by simply saving that file in my modeler, look at that. I have automated that round trip back to Coemo. Now, I haven't overwritten my process, my main process. What I've done is I've created this associated folder, and you can even see the association here under related diagrams. So that way we keep track of you know, changes that had to happen in the development phase, you know, perhaps before we've made it back around to our design phase. And the idea here is, okay, well, with these related diagrams and the changes that we had to make in a quick fashion, I guess, we're able to inform the next design phase. Hey, include this that we discovered we needed to have, and so that kind of moves that conversation forward, so we don't miss out on things that we discovered later on in the automation phase, for example. Is that pretty clear so far, what I've done? So I started out with Coemo, exported that file, opened that file in Modeler, made some changes, exported it back, and we can automatically, or excuse me, did not export it back, but just simply saving that file using the Cloud Connect plugin, we've automatically created a new version in a special folder for this diagram. Everybody clear on that so far?
Yep. Is there also an engine integration?
Oh, you're just jumping all ahead of me, aren't you? Yes, there is an engine integration.
So that was sorry.
It's okay. That's okay. Actually, thank you for the segue. So I'll set that up now. Let me go back into my project. So back to new registration. Right. So now remember, and I'm jumping around a lot, this is the thing that we added here directly in Coemo, right? But and not the same thing as what we just changed in Modeler. So anyway, let's look at the engine or what you might call the deployment integration. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I'll let you know that I have an application that has an embedded Camunda engine running in the background, and I'm just going to deploy this new diagram to that application. Actually, let me do away with this. So we're kind of starting fresh. All right. So cool feature that you get with Community Aware Enterprise is the ability now in the new version of Modeler to directly deploy. This is development phase stuff, right? So I wouldn't be deploying to production. I would be deploying to my locally running instance. Okay, but let's do that. Let's deploy new user registration. Hey, deployment succeeded. That's always good news. Okay, so what do I want to show you here? I will.
I saw it was running the Camunda REST endpoint on the engine, right? That's what you have to be running, the REST engine, in order to be able to do this.
That is correct. So this is a kind of a peek ahead at the demo to come. I'm just using this same application to facilitate me showing you this specific feature. So we have these two. This is an order application. The sneak peek here is this is Baron Rucker's dream of using workflow automation as an orchestration layer on top of microservices, right? Well, we'll come back to that. What I just did was I deployed this new diagram. Unfortunately, I didn't give it a nice name, but this is the same diagram that I just uploaded from Modeler, right? So now let's see about making a change to that model again, and let's see. I'm going to use the space tool. I'll create some space here. I will add some other workflow step. So verifying deployment integration. Okay. So now I'm ready to deploy my new version of the new user registration process. So I've made my changes again. I'm deploying it to my already running service as you called out via the REST API. And now I'm going to head back over to Coemo. And let's see what happened. Alrighty. Apologies for the resolution here. Okay, so we have engine deployment. We have user registration, modeler project, engine deployment. Right. So what we've done here is here was our original project. This Desjardins L&L stands for Lunch and Learn. I'm repurposing a previous presentation here. So there's the thing that we started with, and now because we've deployed a new version of that process to our running instance, then I now have a folder that was automatically created for me called Desjardins Lunch and Learn deployments. So what we see here is the new version of the workflow. Let me zoom out. And it already opens in this visual diffing view, if you will, right? So we're already able to, it preloads at the milestone and related diagram UI and shows us that, hey, through because we deployed a new version of this process, we created a deployment folder. We uploaded that new version to that deployment folder, and we were able to track those changes and have it relate back to the original process that we started with and compare those. Okay, so if I go back home and look at my projects, I still have my original Desjardins Lunch and Learn. We have not overwritten this this diagram. We've not lost any information. We didn't have to remember to make a milestone by way of that in this case engine plugin, right? I just added a simple Java config file to my Spring Boot project. I'm able to sync this back up, and again, the idea here is these changes inform the next design lifecycle phase, right? So that when we all get back together for our sprint planning or program interval planning or however it is you manage your software development lifecycle, we have all of this information at hand to see, well, this is what we started with. These are changes we had to make both in the dev cycle and in the deployment cycle while we were running this already automated process, and we've got all of that information here and nicely linked up, and we're able to compare those versions using the other enterprise product feature that I showed you, which is the visual comparison of those files. So what do we think so far about those 3 individual enterprise Coima product features? Did I make that clear? Do we have any questions?
Yeah. Good stuff. Thank you, Ryan.
I got
Very
one more
welcome.
question.
Okay,
Is
sure.
this tool available to be used kind of standalone internally? Can it be used as a front-end BPMN design tool in more of a, not a cloud kind of scenario, but kind of integrated into an existing system?
Sort of. So, and I'm glad you brought that up because like I said, the community version of this is free to use. It's a software as a service model. You know, you can certainly collaborate, design your workflows. When you save them, they are stored in the cloud, right, managed by us. When you become an enterprise customer, we can give you all of the source for or an image, everything that you would need to set this up and run it on your intranet or on your own cloud, say. And that way you don't have to worry about, like in the case of NewPush, for example, you know, I guess uploading your intellectual property or your customer's intellectual property out to the web at large, right? You have more control over that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think I was thinking more towards what Carlos was saying, which is BPM-NGS, which is kind of a more closely integrated version of designing BPMNs that can be brought into into the integrated system without minus the whole cloud solution, obviously. That versioning.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from. So this tool definitely leverages BPMN.io, right? That JavaScript library. So that's how we get the consistent look between this and our other modeling tool. But the point here is really the collaboration piece, and intentionally not including the properties panel, because we think that as strictly in the automation phase, right? And that's more geared towards developers. We do have customers, community and enterprise, that do build their own web-based modeler, so they can do things like restrict the symbol set and things like that. And they're able to accomplish that by taking advantage of the fact that we're open source and also using BPMN.io to put overlays in or to restrict the symbol set or use custom symbols. All of that is an option.
Yep, that makes sense.
Awesome.
Ryan, just
yes.
I just wanted to maybe enhance one aspect of what Dan was asking. So, and I don't know, Dan, if that was what was interesting to you, but to me, if we could use that modeler to see the diffs the way it's highlighted, which we cannot use currently in the regular Camunda modeler that we use, but not have to be signed up for the enterprise SaaS model. I think maybe that would be, I don't know if there is actually a guy's given a thought to that maybe.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the things that's very attractive about Coima that I found it, is that the whole, diffing aspect. I wasn't sure if there's any sort of commenting / collaboration aspect to it as well.
Oh, absolutely. I guess I took for granted that you guys are already aware of that feature. But yeah, let's try that. So let's just I could wake up my boss who's in Berlin. It's like midnight there. So I won't do that. But if I were to @ him right here as a general comment on the overall model here, he would get an email. It is a pretty cool name. Yes, it is. He would get an email that says, "Hey, Ryan is asking you a question. Come and collaborate." Right. So that's at the process level, right? The kind of global scope, if you will. I'm also able to do that. So you notice here the new registration, right? So we're at the top level. I can do that at the individual element level as well, right? So same trick. Whoever I've previously invited as a collaborator is eligible for me to directly ping them here and bring their attention to specific elements, right? There's another trick. I hadn't planned on showing, but I will. Let's see here. So click to drop an attention point observable by your collaborators. Oh, I may not be able to do that since I don't have anyone really set up as a collaborator at this moment. So take my word for it. I'm able to even, while we're collaborating in near real time, right? Let's say we're on the phone or doing a chat with each other. I can say, you know, hey, take a look at this, and I can literally drop a pin on the element that I want Ragnar to take a look at. So pretty cool stuff.
Ryan, a question may have implied, but are you able to restrict users to only be able to edit part of the BPMN? My team probably would be really interested in doing it to me because they probably don't want me to touch the rest. Just that little circle there.
I guess for, oh, there we go. There's my attention grabber, right? So not exactly. I guess your team would either not invite you to collaborate on the modeling, or they would instead say they would ship you a link that always showed you the, that's not what I wanted to do, the most current version in a read-only mode, right? Mm-hmm. I'm mostly joking, but if I were to generate this URL, copy it, again, I'll go to my handy incognito window to prove to you that I'm not logged in. And then as a guest, anybody with internet access can see the most current version of the diagram. They're unable to edit it. It's read-only. If your team goes back in and makes changes at your direction and you hit refresh here, you're going to see the latest changes. But you can't really partition off parts of the diagram for specific users.
Okay, thank
you. Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm going to stop with Coemo so that I can get to some of the other stuff. Let's go back to. All right, so we are done with Coemo. Back to this just as a visual cue for ourselves, right? So let's take a moment to remind ourselves about the automation phase. And here we will briefly look at Camunda Modeler. If it's not bugging you guys, I'm going to leave this out of full screen mode just so that I can move around a little more quickly. Is everybody able to see this well? Good.
Yep.
Good. So Camunda Modeler is, of course, one of our developer tools. We bill ourselves as, or we brag about our developer friendliness. So there's not really any features specific to Modeler that you wouldn't get with the community version, aside from the plugin that I just showed you, which kind of facilitated that integration with Coemo. So that's the one thing that you wouldn't get as a community user, is the ability to integrate with Coemo, but everything else you get, right? We wouldn't be very developer friendly if that was not the case. So that's our automation phase, right? This is where the magic happens. This is where our developers come. They can design workflows from scratch. They can take workflows that have been designed in Coemo, create your executable models, create decision tables. So DMN, the other standard that we support. Deploy right from the modeler, which I showed you. Additional plugins are available from our open source community, or you can write your own. We have quite a robust community, open source community out there that contribute many different plugins for Modeler. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking about a linting tool. I think about there's a plugin that will highlight in the Modeler for you any transaction boundaries that either are the result of natural wait states within BPMN or that you have added. It may even suggest transaction boundaries that you should add based on our best practices. So that's pretty cool. I believe there's even a BPMN diffing community plugin that you could look up if you were trying to achieve some of that ability to compare between two BPMN diagrams in the modeler, right? But at any rate, all of this, aside from the one integration point with Coemo, is available to you in the community edition. So up next, if we assume that we have successfully automated a process, what are some of the enterprise features that you can take advantage of in the management phase? We'll take a look at Cockpit now. Cockpit is a very powerful tool. Here is an overview of our enterprise versus community features. I will skip this marketing slide in the interest of time and focus on some of the more important ones. So let's see here. I think everybody agrees that it is very important to be able to monitor your live running processes. But what about history? So history is a very important feature that is only available for enterprise users. And as you might imagine, this gives you the same kind of visibility into process instances that have already been executed, right? You can inspect all of the payload data. You can inspect any DMN decisions that were executed, things of that nature. Okay. Up next, what about process version migration? This is another enterprise-only feature, the ability to, well, let me say it like this. Cockpit actually has a kind of a wizard that helps you first create your migration mapping, right, from one process to, from an old version of the process to the new. And once you define the mapping, which it will make suggestions for you automatically, and then you're able to manually map things that it cannot find a suggestion for you to map. You can then select the one or many or a whole batch of running process instances and then migrate them while they're still alive to the new version. So that's something to think about. I think in the interest of time, I'm going to ask you to take my word for it so that I can get to the cool optimized demo. All right, so let's see. What about the improvement phase? So I know many of you have seen Optimize before. If you attended the last user group, right, so you saw that in the showcase demo. I'll reintroduce it to you now, and then we'll take a look at our really cool feature. Again, at a high level, Optimize is our business intelligence and reporting tool. So here you can, and I should say Optimize is an enterprise-only product, right? So the whole product is enterprise-only, and this helps our improve phase, right? So that we can monitor the Camunda and external process automation activities, create detailed reports, create dashboards, which are collections of reports, see where end-to-end processes are running smoothly or hitting bottlenecks, like for example, with our very popular BPMN heat map, which by the way was a community sourced feature. I always like to mention that. You can improve process analysis, identify slow branches, build custom dashboards with alerts, et cetera, et cetera. So I am going to show you a live demo of Optimize, but first I want to set up a little scenario. This is the first of many slides that I have shamelessly stolen from Bernd Drucker, our co-founder, from his awesome microservices orchestration and integration using workflow automation presentation from CamundaCon Live. So for my Optimize live demo, I'm going to introduce you to a microservices scenario. You can think about a classical retail order fulfillment application implemented in a microservices architecture. And let's imagine Amazon's dash button, right? So the idea here is I click the button and paper magically shows up at my door. Of course, we know that several things are happening in the background to make this happen. Basically, the steps would be, and again, still at a high level, click a button or the request has been sent, pay for the item, fetch the item, ship the item, right? Amazon, being as cutting edge and as hip as they are, have implemented this order fulfillment application using microservices. We're hip, we're cutting edge. If Amazon's approach is microservices, then perhaps we should implement our order fulfillment application using microservices too, right? So I'm going to go quickly here so we can get to the demo. Now, here I'm just laying out some really high-level advantages and disadvantages to microservices, right? I'm not going to read these off for you, but I will say it is only a happy accident that there ends up being more disadvantages on my list than advantages. I'm definitely not trying to disparage microservice architecture here. In fact, it is really cool. It is really robust. It is very scalable, right? Some of the particular problem points that I want to address here, and I'm really riffing off of Bernd's presentation, is Discovery of microservices, microservice capabilities can be difficult for developers, right? Trying to leverage those services. So like think about your UI developer. He has to figure out, how do I construct a user experience that reflects the workflow in the UI that we want to have? I have to go and discover what all of our microservices are and what they can do. And maybe that's easy because you have API documentation, maybe not so much. Troubleshooting can be difficult, right? Because we don't really have a centralized point to have a high-level overview of that microservices environment, and so we can, quickly find out through like a BPMN incident where a problem has occurred, and just analysis for improvement can be difficult, right? And we talked about improvement with Optimize, so I'm trying to set that up here. Jumping way ahead, I'm showing you this is the ultimate dream come true for Bernd Drucker. Okay, this is his ideal solution. Basically, he often talks about this need to create a balance between choreography and orchestration in a microservices architecture, right? So he advocates kind of gaining back the lost high-level visibility that we may have had in previous monolithic application structures that we no longer have in our microservices architecture. Okay, so I want you to use your imagination a bit more and think that we have, because we desired our hipster architecture, right? We started from scratch, greenfield development, and built our microservices environment with no orchestration layer. And now we've started to experience these pain points, and we're thinking, you know what, this would be pretty cool. But how do we get there? How do we get from that disparate collection of microservices to something that is managed or orchestrated by a workflow automation layer like Camunda? So there is an in-between phase that I think a lot of companies have to go through, right? And this is where the brand new feature from Optimize really comes in. Okay, so what we're able to do is, in the absence of having used a Camunda orchestration layer to begin with, we can use Optimize to ingest events from our microservices environment and then create some reports around that so that we can maybe quantify how much we do need to implement a workflow management solution as an orchestration layer. So let's see that in action. All right. How am I doing on time? Can I keep going? I think I have about 5 minutes of content left.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, I will do it very quickly. All right, so for you technical folks out there, I'm going to tell you very quickly that what I've done is using Docker Compose, I have kicked off a very simplistic version of a order fulfillment application using disparate microservices. Now, some of the technology that I've used to facilitate this demo would be Kafka, Zookeeper, right, to manage the Kafka pipeline, so to speak. We have a little, somewhat of a custom bit of tooling called that we use to help optimize ingest the events that we're going to see. So let me skip the nerdy stuff for now in the interest of showing you the fun stuff. And I have tabs everywhere, of course. All right, so let's see here. We have I'm going to let this be our visual cue of our microservices application. So we've got two things that are important. One, I want to show you I want to show you our monitoring, our homegrown, monitoring software. And by homegrown, I mean in this fictional universe of we have microservices for our retail fulfillment application. I'm going to turn on the monitoring for these totally not connected to Camunda microservices. And then I'm going to go to our beautiful front end UI, this is the dash button, right? And I'm going to kick off some orders. So I've kicked off some orders. Look, I'm actually able to see those events flowing, right? So these are events that are being dropped onto Kafka, and I have a monitoring tool that is exposing those events to me. But in no way do we have Camunda or Optimize currently connected to this group of microservices. So here's where the cool stuff happens. I hope. I'm logging into Optimize, and what I want to do is an event-based process. Okay. So I'm going to model a new process. This is order fulfillment. I'm going to add an event source. I'm going to choose external events. And good, we have some available. And I'll show you that here are the external events. So totally external to Camunda, totally external to Optimize, with the exception of the little tool that we're using to feed the events off the Kafka message pipe into Optimize for Optimize to ingest. Okay, so what we can now do is, remembering that we have no orchestration layer and no connection to Camunda here, we can quickly model an event-based process. Oh man, I'm suffering from the poor resolution here. I'll turn this down for just a moment so I can get this done. All right, so we're going to make all of these message catch events. Quickly modeling here. Message catch events and an end event that will throw a message out. And now we're going to map these. Okay? We're going to map these to the events, the external events that we have available. So I'm going to forego naming these guys again, just for the interest of time, but I'm going to map this first one to the order placed event. I'm going to map this second one to the payment received event. I'll map this third one to the goods fetched event. And I will map this fourth one to the goods shipped event. And I'll finally map the end event to order complete event. Okay, so we have everything mapped. And now we can save and we can publish. Don't worry, this will not take very much time. It will take some time, but not very much time. All right, so now we have published this event-based process, and now it's eligible for Optimize to do all of its fancy number crunching on that brand new order fulfillment report. Okay, so I'll select the new order fulfillment process report here, or process, I should say. I will decide to report on a flow node duration, and I'll choose our most popular, of course, heat map, and save. And look there, now we have created a mechanism to analyze with the performance of our microservices application in the complete absence of an orchestration layer, right? So this is where Optimize steps in, allows you to do that analysis, determine where some of your pain points are, and maybe you can then quantify your level of effort or return on investment in actually implementing the dream of Bernd, which is the layer that I showed you in the previous slide. All right, so that's how we get from the microservices to this orchestrated example here with Optimize bridging the gap in the middle. So that's it. I promised I'm done. It's now time for Q&A. I'll let you do the larger Q&A instead of me having a specific Q&A, and I got to get one more Star Wars graphic in there. So there we go.
It's on you on May the 4th, I have to tell you.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right. I'm sorry if that ran over, but I did have a very impressive presentation to follow. So hopefully,
No
I do
worries.
have,
Can I have a curveball, Ryan?
I do have one question for you.
Sure.
Regarding the, what's your take on Camunda as being microservices orchestration tool? Like you showed as the optimized can be used, but is it?
I think that it would be ideal if a company starting from scratch in a greenfield development situation who wanted to leverage the robustness and the scalability of microservices would elect upfront to use an orchestration layer. And I think that Camunda is a great fit for that, using the external task pattern, right? So one of the big ideas here is not only to get all this visibility at the top level, but let's say we change the ordering of those steps. That's really not a big deal when you do that with a workflow automation orchestration layer, because there's a level of indirection between your workflow and your actual implementation code. In this case, they would be the microservices. So you can change that around without necessarily having to change any of your microservice code. I think the reality is, however, a lot of companies go for microservices who already have a monolith. Sometimes they do it for good reasons. Sometimes they do it because they want hipster architecture, right? Because everybody else is doing it. And I think that a lot of times orchestration is an afterthought to the decision to use microservices to begin with. That's what I think. So in this way, we're showing you how to bridge the gap. Oh, we probably should have thought of that. Do we have a tool in our toolbox that can help us get from where we are to a more ideal solution, which we argue would be orchestrated microservices?
Okay. That's exactly what I was asking, because I really wanted to see if Camunda sees themselves as a good fit for orchestration of the huge systems to begin with, and that's
absolutely
the use case.
It's a very common use case for us. Thank you for the question.
Hey, Ryan.
For example, you have Zeeb, but Zeeb happens to be just to show that somebody has a different orchestration. And really, that's what you answered to Carlos and Victor. Sorry, that in reality you recommend that we use Camunda, and that's not the optimal solution of Zeeb and Camunda. But it was nice to see that you work seamlessly with Zeeb as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, have you had any of your clients use your current ability to hook into microservices to be able to alert on security event within the microservices?
Do you mean while using that tool, that new feature of Optimize that I just showed, or are you saying more in the general sense?
Mine in general sense.
Yeah, that's certainly a use case. I'm not intimately familiar with specifics around that, but I would just say as a general answer, modeling, being able to model and handle errors and retries to include, potentially security violations. I wouldn't see why that couldn't be done. If you were implementing a Java delegate, say, or even an external task worker, and that implementation was a microservice, because you're connected to the workflow engine, if you encountered some security violation, you would simply throw a BPMN error from your code so that you create that visibility at the top level.
So one thing that I think may not be completely obvious, because it gets a little obscured when we talk about microservices in big air quotes, is that the real underpinning of all this is the fact that those microservices are connected together in a message-based system, right? So they're not communicating through API calls like a SOA type architecture, where one service talks to another service through REST or SOAP or XML or HTTP, but they're actually passing messages around, and that gives Optimize or Camunda the ability to kind of stand in as an intermediary. If you don't have that, it becomes a lot more complicated to introduce them into that architecture. And so in the case of Bob's question, like, can I use this for calling out security concerns? If you have a message that's raised when that security concern occurs, or maybe you want to aggregate multiple messages to identify that security concern. The key there is the messages. You have to be raising those messages out of your services in order for them to be listened to.
That's a really good point. I had to skip some of the content and some of the conversation, but the current state of microservices in big air quotes is that rather than, like you said, I think rather than using web calls, which introduce latency, right? So there's going to be some latency in communicating even via REST amongst your microservices. More modern solutions are using messaging, right? And it's that specific use case where there's a messaging layer already present, but there is no orchestration layer that we're able to step in with optimize and do the trick that I just showed you, right? That doesn't mean that it's not that Camunda wouldn't be good for orchestration for microservices that were not communicating with a message bus. It would probably be more of a development undertaking to get there if you didn't start there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in our case, we use Rabbit, so we don't use Kafka per se. We do have the protocol for all messages, but we currently use the different orchestrations to collaborate on a topic within multiple messages. And that's where I was thinking, if we were to use the optimize in order for you to be able to gather similar events from different topics, I think you then have an ability to orchestrate across multiple domains. That's what my thought was. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I can tell you that we're actually looking at the same scenario in Ultimate. I'm in Michelle's ear like every other day about it.
That's great. That certainly would be an area of our interest if you guys ever wanted to do collaborate. It's something we can work on together. Yeah,
I'm always up for any help. I even can point you to a GitHub project that could potentially be of service.
I'll tell you what, you teach me about the compensating event, I'll teach you about catching security errors.
Deal.
I like the horse trading. That's very cool.
Well, thank you so much, Ryan, for your time and for presenting to us today. Oh, is there someone else asking a question?
Oh, my coworker's going to call me out here. Let's see. Oh, that was just because of time. You are so right, Josh. Thank you for calling that out. Besides, that was called out in the previous awesome presentation, how awesome our CSM team is. But let's not forget Josh. That is absolutely accurate.
Thank you, guys. I kept quiet. Didn't want to take away from any of the technical talk. So I'll go back on mute, but just wanted to say that we're present here, always willing to help our customers. So just have a good night. And guys, thank you for hosting this. This has been a great event.
Good talking to you.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.